Core gameplay principles aside, Uncharted 4: A Thief's End is unlike any game from the series that came beforehand. Naughty Dog's previous ROMs were all pure pulpy adventures, but the nature of the serialized treasure hunting genre is such that for a new story to happen, everything must return to status quo. The protagonist can't just successfully find the treasure to live a life without worries, otherwise they might not have motivation to find new ones. They also can't retire or settle down, nor can they really change as a person for the same reason. This has already taken its toll on Uncharted 3. A new motivating factor was needed for Nate to keep adventuring like before. There had to be a new reason why Elena still acts as a counterweight so their relationship dynamics could continue. Another antagonistic force had to go after the same treasure as us for nefarious purposes beyond gold. And for all its flaws, Uncharted 3 has ended on a note that doesn't quite assume new adventures. While exact details of his past remained unknown, Nate has moved on from his obsession, we learned about that as well, the relationship with Elena was mended once more, and all that was symbolized by him letting go of Drake's ring in favor of the engagement one, a permanent character change that no sequel can walk back from. The whole series could have just ended there. So, for Uncharted 4 to simply happen, it must break all that once again, and it does. But this time, to deconstruct the genre tropes, not follow them. What kind of people actually do treasure hunting for a living? Why, after almost being blown to bits on a train high in the Himalayas, they decide another ancient mystery is worth it? What causes this desire to follow cryptic clues towards an absolutely improbable myth? This has an effect on everything. Story structure, writing style, game pacing, level design. This 2016 adventure is the absolute opposite of its loud, bombastic, constantly moving forward predecessors. Previous games launch with a bold statement thanks to pompous variations of Nate's theme. Not at Thief's End, though. Yeah, this is not just another Uncharted tale. Although the actual game does start pretty loud. Nate and someone named Sam are on a boat driving towards an island, thugs insistently chasing them. We get a quick glimpse of vehicle driving, as well as a little bit of shooting and other action before getting to our first flashback. Little Nathan getting verbally chastised in the orphanage mentioned in Uncharted 3 for getting into a fight, presumably over a book.
I don't see why I'm the only one being punished.
Because you started the fight.
He wouldn't give me back my book.
I told you to leave those books in your room. You only have yourself to blame.
Doesn't give him the right to just snatch it from me.
Does that give you the right to start throwing punches?
It wasn't just about the book.
What was it then?
Nothing. I'll save it for confession.
No matter what I try, you seem insistent on going down the same sad road as your brother.
From the get-go, the game starts examining Nathan as an actual human being, someone who is easily provoked into a fight and can't find understanding with authority. And it turns out Sam is his brother who ran away from the orphanage but seems to have sneakily returned to call Nate outside.
Come on, here, give me a hand. Sheesh, you're right. This is just feeding you enough.
In my Uncharted 2 review, I talked about the psychological effect agency has on us. When we press a button and something happens, our brain thinks it's us doing the action due to projection. But if the character we play as would have done the same thing in a scripted, uncontrollable event, we consider that a different person is doing it and therefore the emotional response is not the same. Uncharted 2 made use of this to create exciting, playable movie scenes, but A Thief's End takes this principle further to put ourselves into Nathan's headspace, and therefore better understand him as a person through actual gameplay and accompanying elements. This is why we start with a very simple stealth tutorial that's technically unnecessary at this point. We aren't actually going to make proper use of stealth until much later in the game. But Uncharted 4 needs to make us feel unwelcome in the orphanage. We can't be seen and therefore resort to sneaking about with limited movement. The accompanying music is tense, but as soon as we find an open window and get outside, the soundtrack becomes much more adventurous.
Mr. Catherine?
Darn.
Mr. Catherine. I forgot my key. And can you open the gate for me?
And as we progress from simpler challenges to more daring ones across rooftops, the tone of the music shifts, tempo picks up, new instruments are introduced, while existing ones get more accentuated.
Okay. Right down the middle. Nice and easy. Oops. Was that a sin? I think that's a sin.
In general, the soundtrack of Uncharted 4 is extremely dynamic and often connected to what's actually happening on the screen, with loops smoothly transitioning into one-time dinners when necessary. As a result of all these elements combined, we as players feel how exhilarating and addicting Nate's newfound freedom is in comparison to the tight, restricted spaces of the orphanage. The core platforming principles stay the same as in previous games, but they feel much more physical in nature. During climbing, unless there is no safe jump opportunity, Nathan reaches his hand outwards in whichever direction you're pushing the stick, and if the hand touches a ledge, he'll just naturally grab it. Of course, you can shimmy faster or jump from ledge to ledge, it all feels extremely smooth. There are 3 big mechanical additions introduced in various parts of the game. The first and most important one is the rope, which you can hook onto plenty of designated spots. Sometimes it is used to pull objects, but for the most part it's for swinging around. Now, previously, rope swinging in Uncharted game has been functional at best, but in The Thief's End it actually feels great for 2 reasons. First, the direction you swing towards is directly related to where you push the stick, so it's absolutely not a problem to turn when necessary, go around corners, or otherwise course correct yourself. Second, the safe jump is based on distance and not your momentum. Nathan will reach out his hand when it's safe to jump, and even if the rope starts moving back, you can still make that leap. It's unrealistic, but very comfortable to use. Then we have sliding, which previously was more of a set-piece thing, but now it's a regular mechanic. Pretty straightforward, there are slopes you can slide down on with limited control of your direction to eventually jump off when necessary. And finally, there is the piton you get in the middle of the game, which you can use on craggy surfaces to create your own handhold. A simple mechanic, but it adds one new button to press from time to time, which is nice. Plus it retains the feeling of physicality, like how you still slide down a bit when you latch onto a surface after a bigger jump. What Uncharted 4 never does is use all these elements together to create platforming gauntlets, until one case at the very end of the game which exists to elicit a specific emotional response. All other times it's a combination of 2 aforementioned elements at most. I would not call this a flaw. Flaws are failure to meet the expectations from a game's particular direction. But like in previous Uncharted titles, the point of platforming here is to provide a variety of situations for pacing purposes, not specifically challenge you on mastery of the platforming mechanics throughout the entire experience. A game can't fail at something it doesn't attempt to do. Getting back to our heroes, the reason why Sam came after Nathan is that he has found the buyer of their mom's belongings and proposes to procure them back, so to speak.
What do you say we go and get it back?
You mean steal it?
It's not stealing if it was ours to begin with.
The writing style in Uncharted 4 is very different from its predecessors. It's not as laconic because the game is not interested in efficiency per se. A Thief's End is not about letting us know all the necessary context as fast as possible so we could go to the next action scene. While the dialogues are not as snappy, they also don't regurgitate the same points over and over again or fail to provide insight. Quite the opposite. The cutscenes are really good at letting us understand the characters, their motivations and relationships, not only through dialogues themselves, but also gestures and subtle expressions which are as important as words.
What was that? Really? Again?
It's nothing.
You told me you'd stay out of trouble, though.
He was talking shit about us.
So?
He said that Dad dumped us here because we're worthless, and Mom is in hell because—
Nathan, come on. They're just saying it because it gets to you, all right? You just gotta learn to laugh it off.
You wouldn't.
Well, do as I say, not as I do. Here. You'll catch a cold.
So, scenes like these work on multiple levels. In this case, show how Sam cares for Nathan, but also why they both don't listen to authority, while at the same time providing context to things like Nate's overall sarcastic demeanor in previous games. Uncharted 3 already showed how flashbacks can be dangerous and add more questions than anything, but Uncharted 4 is an example of how flashbacks can be implemented in a very fitting way. Right after this one, we're going to have another flashback scene where Uncharted 4 takes cues from a little at the time of its release offhand line from the very beginning of Drake's fortune.
So unless you want to end up in a Panamanian jail, we should probably handle this ourselves.
What's worse?
You obviously haven't been in a Panamanian jail.
Esto va a estar más fácil de lo que esperaba, ¿eh?
The Panamanian jail sequence is an introduction to the game's melee combat, which takes more cues from the simple and snappy Uncharted 2 system than from the brawler-like one of Uncharted 3. You have a hit button, a counterattack when grappled, and dodge, which sadly doesn't work in special cinematic single enemy fights and can be done only in standard gameplay ones. This is annoying as it creates situations where you're sort of forced to take hits, limiting your sense of agency in what are presented as important sequences. At least there is not a lot of these melee mini-boss fights in the game. In general though, the close combat in Uncharted 4 works well as it retains the technically complex and visually cool contextual actions and reactivity from Uncharted 3 without making enemies too spongy. Your allies are also more implied. They may help you escape a grapple, can grab enemies themselves too, setting those up for a one-hit knockdown from your side. Plus, the fact that melee combat is so quick and simple doesn't punish you for using it during firefight situations, as opposed to Uncharted 3, let's say. Now, Nathan didn't pick a fight with prisoners just because. There was a deal with the guard Vargas to take him to solitary, from where it will be simpler to access the old parts of the prison. Unfortunately, Vargas learned that Nathan is looking for the plunder from Henry Avery's biggest heist worth 400 million, and that the clues regarding where to find it are in the prison where Avery's first mate was hanged. So he wants a cut.
What? What do you want?
The riches of paradise.
It's a metaphor.
No. You and your friends did not pay to get into this infernal place in search of a metaphor. I want in.
For now, Nathan delegates this question to future Nate, and through platforming around the rocky cliffs, gets to the pirate's cell to solve the game's first little puzzle.
Sun and moon. Alchemy symbols for gold and silver. Wait a sec. I saw something like this on the letter.
It's understandable why out of all the various gameplay elements it has attempted to incorporate, the Uncharted franchise had the most trouble with puzzles. A very important aspect of any Uncharted game in particular is momentum. That's why the games couldn't resort to complex puzzles, as should players get stumped for too long, they lose the sense of progress and therefore the supposed variety would transform into tedium. Again, in the context of the series specifically, this doesn't mean complex puzzles have no place in action-adventure games. On the other hand, if the puzzles are too simple, they feel like a waste of time. You still need the audience to do some logical thinking. It's a delicate balance. And using the learnings from Uncharted 3, which was the most successful in this regard so far, A Thief's End has found this balance, and that's why it feels comfortable to place more puzzles than in the rest of the series combined. Even the first one in the cell is simple but not brain-dead, requiring a little bit of correlation between zodiac symbols and numbers to figure out behind which slab is the next clue towards Avery's treasure, a crucifix. Later on, puzzles get more elaborate, but still retain their straightforwardness. You'll find a bunch of stuff ranging from the more traditional conundrums like placing the symbols in their correct positions by rotating 4 interconnected circles, to doing cutouts in your journal and figuring out how different slabs have to be properly connected to each other based on clues you find on paintings. These puzzles not only are atmospheric, but actually achieve their goal of providing variety and changing the pacing without halting the momentum. However, Uncharted 4 also has decided to experiment with, let's call them, navigational puzzles, where you have to deduce how to get across a certain obstacle. The series has dabbled in this only on a couple occasions. Navigation was usually more about pathfinding than anything. Uncharted 4, though, decides to add a bunch of situations about figuring out how to open the pathway towards the next level section and... well, the resulting scenarios are not particularly great since a lot involve crates of one sort or another. I'm not kidding, both you and your allies are going to do a very considerable amount of crate pushing.
Look at you.
One crate coming up.
I thank you, good sir.
Heads up!
All right, we're in business.
Whoop. Ow. Below.
Look out below!
At one point it feels like the game even makes fun of itself, because Sam searches for a crate for so long that we platform the long way around faster than he finds one.
You're already up here? Where were you?
Finding a way to get you up here.
Now, to be absolutely fair, there are creative crate-related puzzles in this game, for the most part because they also incorporate the rope into the mix. The rope is also the main reason why having your partner search for a crate to get you up can be so annoying at times, as it would easily solve most of these situations. Which brings us back to the topic of ludonarrative dissonance. While throughout the Uncharted reviews I dispute what should or should not be considered ludonarrative dissonance, the rope definitely should. It is acknowledged in the story, acknowledged in gameplay, except when it's sometimes arbitrarily forgotten in both areas. That's dissonance. Back to the Panamanian jail though. Nate actually bullshits Vargas, saying he hasn't found anything, so he could buy some time and discuss the matters with Sam and the young rich guy to the inherited money that has made the endeavor possible, Rafe.
It's hollow. Why would one of Avery's men go through the trouble of hiding a cheap crucifix?
It's not a crucifix. Technically, a crucifix is a representation of Jesus. It's not Jesus.
Nate and Sam realize that the crucifix actually depicts Saint Dismas, and it just so happens that there is a Saint Dismas church in Scotland where Avery was last sighted. However, this is where things get out of hand. The guys Nathan had a fight with to get into solitary come back with a vengeance. Vargas saves the crew but realizes that Nate lied to him and now demands a fourth of the entire Avery treasure haul. Rafe, well, let's just say Rafe is a person prone to making rash decisions.
Looks like we have a deal.
Yes, we have a deal. And if you ever cross me again...
Jesus.
That's that.
Are you out of your goddamn mind?
You want to find out?
A prison break sequence ensues, traditional linear platforming fare with a bit of melee combat mixed in, and then we get a scene which showcases how Uncharted 4 has mastered facial animation, sound design and audio mixing to create a truly gut-wrenching experience.
Sam! Come on! I'll pull you up! I got you! Come on! Sam, no. No, you hold on! Hold on! Sam! Give me your other arm! Come on, reach! No! Sam!
We gotta move.
Oh no, he's still down there!
No, he's gone. Come on, the boat's just beyond the wall.
No, I can't. Can't leave him behind.
Nate! Your brother is dead. Either come with me or join him. Just have it your way.
Sam. Oh God, no. Sam.
As players, we barely know Sam at this point, but the sequence still works. And the transition between jumping into water and the intro credits is very stylish. Even Nate's theme, that in previous games is usually loud and bombastic, here is more contemplative. The credits showcase events from Uncharted 1 to 3 that have happened between the jail segment and present time, and there's a very important reason why we're shown all the adventuring and action Nathan has been doing throughout the years. Because for a while, there won't be any of that. What follows after is probably what will make you either hate or love Uncharted 4. This next segment would be pretty awful for a game like Uncharted 2, let's say, but A Thief's End is interested in deconstructing tropes that very same Among Thieves used full force, and to do that it wants to put us into Nathan's headspace. Abandoned as a child, traumatized by the death of his brother with whom they search for treasures together, this already paints a picture of someone who enjoys to rush into adventure as means of escapism. But now he, and as a result us, has to go through the most boring level in the entire franchise, which arguably makes it the most important section in the entire game. Remember, interaction projects feelings on us. This is not just a cutscene quickly and snappily showcasing that after previous games, Nathan led a life he didn't necessarily consider fulfilling. By doing the same thing that he does, we are not fulfilled. There is nothing exciting about searching for stray boxes in the deep ocean, getting them back into a container and then connecting it all to cables. Yeah, sure, it's a showcase of 2 new systems for the series, full underwater traversal and physical rope interactions, both of which work great. But this is not the kind of stuff one typically buys an Uncharted game for. So the player naturally asks, where's the set pieces, where's the explosions, where's the jumping off fallen buildings? So far there was only a little bit of platforming and now we're carrying boxes. Just 2 actually, but that's more than enough already. It's a dangerous move to put in boring stuff on purpose, but it shows Uncharted 4's commitment to try and create emotions through gameplay. And players are yearning for some big-time action, just like Nathan is, even though he tries to lead a normal life and denies his boss Jamison's proposal to take a salvage job in Malaysia, an illegal one since nobody can get the required permits. Nathan, however, made a promise that he's not going to be participating in any sorts of illegal activities anymore. And just after that, we get to explore Nate and Elena's attic, full of relics from previous adventures, as if teasing us to remember how awesome they were. You can even take a toy gun and start shooting at static targets with one of the best and most memorable tracks from Uncharted 1 playing in the background.
Don't let him flank you, Nate. Right. Eat plastic. I gotta keep moving.
Keep in mind that outside a little bit from the in medias res beginning, this is the first proper shooting sequence in the entire game. While cute, it's been an hour and we're playing make-believe instead of the famous Uncharted set-piece action the series is known for. we miss it the same way Nathan does. While Uncharted 3 is the only game that has shown Nathan being really obsessive about a particular goal, A Thief's End wants to point out that the life of adventure is something he keeps getting back to regardless. Because it's thrilling, it's exciting, it's addicting.
Boring stuff. Tell me about the article.
Well, it started out as this fluff piece about tourism in Bangkok, but I don't think the magazine is gonna like the angle that I'm taking because everyone immediately commented about how rude the smog was, that it was like shock to the lungs, like the second that you got off the plane, so kind of took this U-turn and became this elegy about
Ah! What?
Where are you?
I'm in here, being stabbed with a fork.
Oh, really?
So when Nathan zones out from a discussion with his loving wife, we can understand him. We know that what's happening now is far more reasonable in life, but reasonable is not what we've come to play Uncharted for. And look, the writing, animations, they're all absolutely amazing, and it's very difficult not to showcase absolutely every cutscene, because each one is a perfect example of conveying emotions and feelings not just through dialogue, but just simple gestures and subtle verbal cues or facial expressions. One of the reasons why this works so well is that besides its graphic advancements, Uncharted 4 has retained the visual identity of previous titles. And even though they were focusing on authenticity, they were not absolutely fully realistic games. And neither is Uncharted 4. There is a slight stylization to things like hair or tiny exaggerations to aforementioned facial expressions that, while obviously authentic, are a bit more expressive than people usually are in real life. And then suddenly that graphical fidelity goes back several decades as we start playing Crash Bandicoot in World.
Oh, what happened? You fell in the pit.
I don't know. How do I climb back out?
You're dead.
Well, that's not realistic. I would have climbed back out. He should learn to climb. Climbing's always helped me.
Yes, we have to play a segment of an entirely different game before we can continue with Uncharted 4. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I think it's great that A Thief's End stretches player anticipation as far as it reasonably can. Reasonably being the key word here. While Uncharted 4 deliberately has us go through moments that are not that exciting, the game's goal is to get us into Nathan's headspace, not actually bored to death. As mentioned before, games like Uncharted are about momentum. And even in this slower start, it's retained. Every scene has a meaning, adds something to the plot or characterization, and creates just enough anticipation that we go, okay, now it's about time shit hits the fan and we get the Uncharted we came for. And it does, when suddenly, one late night, Sam appears in Nate's office.
Yeah, can I help you?
Yeah, I'm, looking for my little brother. It's about your height, a little bit leaner, definitely less gray in the temples.
Sam?
It's good to see you again, Nathan.
Before discussing Sam's plight and how that affects the plot moving forward, we have to talk about Sam himself as a character. Let's get the obvious out of the way first. In and of itself, the trope of a not-mentioned long-lost relative suddenly becoming an integral part of an ongoing series is not new, and it always feels melodramatic. Because it is! But the style of the trope does not define the quality of implementation, and I would say Sam's inclusion is handled exceptionally well. Really, the only retroactive question that appears is why didn't Marlowe mention Sam to Nate in Uncharted 3, but considering how Uncharted 3 is full of its own weird questions and borderline retcons, we can just as well retroactively imply that Marlowe revealed just enough to showcase that she knows everything about Nathan. That would be in style of her character. In Uncharted 4, we're shown Sam's supposed death, which was a huge trauma for Nathan. He didn't tell anyone about it except Sully, and Sully knew well enough to not bring it up on his own. Nathan's adventurous escapist tendencies not only create a valid reason for fully blocking that information. While exploring the attic, he can't even make himself look at a photo of him and Sam, but also become understandable on their own. Nathan and Sam wanted to become great explorers, and that's what Nathan kept doing his whole life after Sam's death. Not being a psychologist, I wouldn't be able to name the exact term for this kind of tendency, but it becomes extremely clear that a person who throws himself into deadly situations over and over does so to numb the pain from losing loved ones like his mother or brother. From a deconstruction perspective, exploring what makes people like Nathan tick, Sam's inclusion makes perfect sense. And why we haven't seen Sam in the flashback of Uncharted 3 is also easily explained in Uncharted 4 by mentioning that they were often taking turns being in prison, which again makes sense. There are also just some wonderful little details like Sam having the same clothes that Nathan had in the Uncharted 3 flashback. Okay, there are some newly added details there, but with such graphical advancements it's natural to have them. The implication of the overall look though is that of hand-me-down clothes. But more than that, after the adventurous nature of Nathan straining the relationship between him and Elena between games several times already, for this last one we need an excuse that will be so big, so outlandish even, changing everything we know, that we'd understand why and how Nathan would jump back into the treasure-seeking addiction. Sam is all those, and he is in trouble. It turns out Sam was saved after being shot, only to be thrown back into prison with information about that hidden, so nobody could get him out, and he'd rot for the rest of his days in a cell for the death of Vargas. In the same cell as the drug baron Hector Alcazar, who over the years has taken a liking to Sam, particularly for his stories about Avery's treasure. So when Alcazar staged an escape from prison, he took Sam with him, in what will be a Thief's End first prolonged shooting sequence in a flashback where we actually play as Sam.
Samuel, are you ready to seek your fortune?
Yeah.
Vámonos.
Within the context of the series, Uncharted 4 is a good example of how the core gameplay really matters. One of my criticisms regarding the first Uncharted game was how every weapon there felt the same, and Uncharted 2 has improved upon that by making each have a distinct game feel to it even within the same class. A Thief's End, in terms of these feelings, is somewhere in between. You will see some difference between weapon types, but not as much between different guns within those types. But that's fine because the act of shooting on its own feels great and snappy. One thing that really helps with that is how the targeting reticle works. It shows the absolute exact spread zone of your bullets, and each time you shoot there's a dot in the spot where the bullet has flown. If it hits anybody, it transforms into an X. If that shot was deadly, the X becomes orange, and the headshot is signified by an orange, let's call it star pattern. This abstract representation provides immediate feedback to absolutely every shot that is registered by our brains faster than noticing what happens with the enemy animations. Such an immediate feedback loop also gives a sense of physicality to it all and makes the act of shooting quite satisfying. But mechanically speaking, it is still pretty simple. What makes combat in Uncharted 4 work is not the shooting on its own, it's how all the game's elements are combined in arenas. Previously, in Uncharted 2 and 3, levels were pretty segmented, focusing on one particular thing with different variables, either mostly platforming or mostly shooting. The combination of the two were preserved for set pieces. Uncharted 4 in general has far more open level design than previous games, but this new style has affected combat arenas the most. Now they're full of opportunities to jump, slide and rope swing around while shooting and hitting the bad guys. As a result, you can be very creative, shoot someone on one side, then quickly reposition to hit another dude, and then swing after straight onto the third one. To adapt to this openness, the AI has been redefined to assign different roles to bad guys, either standing, engaging, or flanking, depending on the relative position between you and them. Though some enemy archetypes like snipers and armored shotgunners have permanently assigned roles regardless of what's happening for a clearer sense of identity. A Thief's End seems to have taken lessons from Uncharted 3 and decided to remove the ability to throw grenades back, which I think is ultimately the correct choice. Now when somebody tries to flush you out, you actually have to reposition. Uncharted 4 goes even further. Tons of cover in the game is actually fully destructible, alongside just a metric shitton of props and environmental objects, which creates incredibly impressive visuals during the fights. So Uncharted 4 really pushes for this dirty, constantly moving improvisational style where you keep trying various things out, and it's incredibly fun. Though that style does not really gel that well at all with difficulties beyond normal. While never falling to the state of Drake's Fortune in this regard, the series still hasn't figured out its relationship with difficulty levels, and higher ones force you to keep distance and stay safe, which is antithetical to the design of the combat arenas. So I'd say it's still better to play the game on normal difficulty. Although there is one aspect that helps on every difficulty mode, and that's a vastly improved stealth system. Previously, sneaking around in Uncharted was never really an important thing. You could do it comfortably enough in specifically set up environments in Uncharted 2 and 3, but in The Thief's End it actually becomes a valid gameplay style thanks to grass hiding zones, investigation indicators, as well as the ability to mark enemies to keep track of their position. Now, it should be noted that there's pretty much no toolkit designated specifically for stealth, not even a possibility to throw rocks, so the system as a whole still remains basic. But a full-fledged stealth system is not necessary for a game like Uncharted. What's important is that first, the grass makes it easier for enemies to lose track of you than before, and second, there is a lot of areas that you can beat without getting noticed, and a bunch that you can ghost without killing a single enemy. So what the stealth system implementation does in Uncharted 4 is add more choices on how to handle pretty much any given encounter. And I should note they don't happen as often as in previous games, but that is balanced out with the added depth that incorporates all the mechanics. Combine that with greater utilization of dynamic music systems, the level of potential distraction in the arenas, and every fight feels like a mini set piece. It's great! I do, however, have to mention that for successful pacing in a linear game, when standard encounters are open like they are in The Thief's End, each one needs to have some unique memorable element to it. But not every encounter has it. As a result, a significant number of them, particularly in Scotland and the island of Libertalia, feel pretty samey, despite different setups, environments, and overall visual design. However, all those other encounters that do have something unique to them are the best arenas in the entire franchise so far, and that's without taking into account the dedicated set pieces. The firefight at the drawbridge, where on one side you've got the walls and on the other trucks with mercs, and both you and enemies have avenues to switch from one half to another. The ambush in lavish mansion halls across 3 different floors with enemies pouring down from each one, forcing you to keep moving and change floors. They and other encounters are extremely exciting. Not Sam's prison escape though, it's actually very by the books as far as encounters go, with not a lot of stuff happening, but in this case it's forgivable since it essentially acts as a shooting tutorial. Upon escaping, we get to see what makes Hector Alcazar a very compelling villain. His calmness and seeming kindness hides the true persona that's ready to easily find and kill anyone who doesn't do what they want.
So, how long do you think it will take for you to retrieve Avery's treasure?
I don't know. I mean, I get back to the States, I can resume my search. Oh, okay. Just wait a minute. Hey, take it easy.
You see, the problem is, I'm having all these doubts into my mind.
Hector, listen to me. I will find it. I swear.
How long?
6 months.
People are lazy. They always ask for more time than they actually need. 3 months.
3 months is a...
3 months. Half the treasure. Can you do it? Say it.
3 months. Half the treasure.
So now, the threat is established. Sam is out of prison, but if he doesn't pay Alcazar half of Avery's treasure in 3 months, he's a dead man. Nate tells how Rafe bought the entire land surrounding the St. Dismas Cathedral in Scotland and in 15 years hasn't found anything. But Sam reveals that he has located an intact copy of the St. Dismas cross that's going up for black market auction in an Italian private estate, and that must hold a clue to where the treasure is. Now, a moment happens where even though it's in a cutscene, we are sort of on the same page with Nathan. We know that in the context of everything that happened, going to an illegal auction to steal a cross to find a treasure of questionable existence is not the right thing to do. Especially when it involves lying to one's wife that Jameson has managed to get the permits for the Malaysia job, and that's where, as far as Elena knows, Nathan will be going. No mention of Sam.
Hey, hon, it's me. Yeah, listen, you're not gonna believe this. Jameson just walked in here with the permits.
From a relationship perspective, this is an extremely poor way to go about handling the problem, and we all get that. But goddamn, this is Uncharted, this is adventure, and what better excuse there is to break a promise than to help the long-lost brother from becoming a really permanently lost brother. So, we're all in on finally getting some action as we officially start the main quest of finding Avery's treasure.
Sully?
Know what I love about partying with a bunch of crooks?
What's that?
Nobody cares if you smoke indoors.
Nate calls Sully, who back in the day wasn't on the best terms with Sam, to help with the whole auction. However, after infiltrating the estate, they find out that the order of the auction was changed and the crucifix is already out on the stands. Improvisation ensues, Nate goes to cut the power, Sam to blend in as a waiter, and Sully to make sure the crucifix stays in place. While he waits, Sully happens to meet Rafe and the leader of his hired mercenary army Shoreline, Nadine Ross.
Well, remember where we are. This crowd didn't get rich by playing fair.
Which is why you really need someone watching your back in a place like this.
If Hector Alcazar is a villain who needs to make a strong impression immediately to constantly remain in the back of our minds, Rafe and Nadine are antagonists that don't have that strong of a starting impact, but get more developed as we go. Later the game does some excellent things with both to connect everything into a singular thematic experience. At any rate, while the heist is successful, things go south and we get our very first big, proper Uncharted action sequence. There is a disappointing moment related to the previously mentioned absence of a dodge button in the special one-on-one fight, rearing its head in the fight against Nadine. She's extremely well trained and you can't win, which as far as I'm concerned is a fine way to go about it, but lack of dodge creates a feeling that you can't really even try to not get beat up. But all is forgiven since the fight with Nadine is followed up by an exceptional transition.
Alright, here we go.
Jesus Christ, Nathan!
Hey, how's it going?
I think I'm done with this auction, huh?
Oh yeah, me too.
And holy shit, all the things that we have discussed, this is when you finally see it in action. Things break, allies help out, you keep repositioning and fighting dirty, there's chaos, awesome music. This is Uncharted. Hours of waiting and it's finally here and it's absolutely exhilarating. No wonder Nate wants to keep going after finding the clue in the crucifix showing that all these years, Rafe was trying to find Avery's treasure in the wrong place. And yeah, as hopeful empathetic people, we understand that Nate is doing pretty horrible stuff. He's lying to his wife because of the excuse he came up with for himself that this is required to save Sam, but we all know that there are so many other potential ways to go about it.
The biggest pirate treasure of all time is within our grasp.
I thought this was about saving Sam.
It is. But come on, it's both, right? We need the treasure so we can save Sam.
How is Elena cool with all this? Jesus, kid.
Look, it's just not that simple.
With all that you two have been through together.
She wouldn't understand this.
You are not giving her enough credit.
I can't take that chance.
This is why it's not a problem if somebody happened to not develop a connection with Sam by this point. The story still works because it's the thrill of adventure that helps us identify with Nathan. In Scotland, Nate and Sam find a series of tests devised by Avery together with Thomas too, a pirate captain who was presumed to have died in the Gunsway heist. For those that prove worthy, a map of Kings Bay in Madagascar is shown with a message that should they push on, paradise awaits. Nathan deduces that the pirate captains were recruiting for some purpose. Rafe and Nadine are close behind though, thanks to Nadine being tired of digging. Her men started exploding the shit out of everything. After another exciting set piece where the entire cave system is crumbling down due to the Drake streaking shoreline to failing the pirate test, the crew has set their sights on Madagascar.
Feast your eyes, gentlemen. Wow.
Spectacular.
The level design in Uncharted 4 is in general more open than that of previous games, beyond just the combat arenas. The segments where you simply explore and jump around tend to take a hub funneling approach, meaning that you're given a place with a bunch of nooks and crannies to explore, alongside various alternative pathways to climb and whatnot, while being funneled towards the next mandatory scene. This actually makes the act of finding optional collectibles the most enjoyable it has been in the series thus far, especially considering that many of them, treasures in particular, since now you'll often find letters and other examinable objects, are gated behind the little challenges or cute events, like having to climb a clock tower beyond what's necessary for the golden path, or haggling with a street merchant to get an artifact.
Oh, this is something out of Avery's era. Where did you get this?
Friend, that is a very unique item. I'd give you a discount. $500.
Come on, are you kidding? I don't even know if it's real. I'll give you $50 for it.
$400, and it's real. Had other buyers interested in that piece.
Come on, man. 200, okay? That's all I have on me.
I cannot possibly part with it for less than 300. That is my final offer.
All right, I'll take it. 300.
Nate, really?
Done.
You see that? That's how you haggle.
You say so.
There are a couple levels where Uncharted 4 takes this principle to its extreme, like the Madagascar one. It's not open world, but it's very wide, and there are many optional challenges you can complete for collectibles, while being ever so slightly funneled from various directions towards a specific point of no return that can lead to the next segment or a scripted action scenario.
Okay, don't panic! Don't panic!
I am very much panicking here.
The cable's gonna snap!
Nate!
I got you!
Hold on tight, kid!
I got you!
During downtime, there's lots of fun conversation between our characters, and the vehicle mechanics in A Thief's End are very solid. They're sort of focused on faux physics. There's just enough weight for you to feel like neither the 4x4 nor the boat are light, floaty objects, but they're still really easy to turn and control. Traction in the 4x4 segments, for example, is important only in specific moments where dirt is a factor. This type of exploration adds a new facet of pacing that was largely missing from the series before, barring a few scenes. Which is another reason why Uncharted 4 can feel pretty different from its predecessors. They were always focused on constantly moving forward, but to go along with its more introspective approach, A Thief's End from time to time wants you to just take it all in, at your own pace. As we explore Madagascar while trying to be ahead of Rafe and his mercenaries, we eventually stumble upon what turns out to be a map.
Gotta push a button, pull something.
Maybe one of the arms, or...
Give it a shot.
Boys, whenever you're done fondling poor St. Dismas, I think you might want to come take a look at this.
It showcases 12 towers, each with a sigil of a known pirate captain, and the crew surmises that the treasure must be in one of those towers. The question would be, which one? There are two possibilities based on the worn-down engraving on Avery's coin Nate took in Scotland. Nate and Sam split up to cover both towers since they learn Rafe has figured out their importance as well. Sally and Nate go to the tower that's right in the middle of Kings Bay, which sets us up for a perfect opportunity to talk about the game's spacing at large.
Sully, say cheese.
Nate, come on.
Come on, say cheese.
Cheese.
The nature of addiction is such that every time an addict reaches a new high, it's not enough anymore. They need more. Nathan in Uncharted 4 is contextualized as an adventure and thrill addict, which fits with the progression of the core series from Drake's Fortune to Drake's Deception. The scope and epicness was just getting bigger and bigger. Uncharted 4 represents this addiction, this search for a new high in its pacing. As we have already discussed, it actually begins with creating a sense of withdrawal, actively denying traditional Uncharted gameplay and having us clamor for it alongside Nathan. But once we finally reach Italy, Uncharted 4 doesn't shoot from absolutely all calibers. Don't get me wrong, the levels are great, but they are relatively small and the sequence of escaping the auction, while exciting, is pretty short. That wave ends, and then a new one begins in Scotland, with larger areas to explore, more combat encounters, actual puzzles, and a set piece at the end that's bigger than anything we have seen in Italy. A new high.
Nathan! I'm okay! Get off this thing! That's my chance! Come on!
Then Uncharted 4 brings us to a new wave. And while it starts with a calm exploratory location, Madagascar is the largest space we've been to yet, not just in A Thief's End, but the entire series. Reaching Kings Bay, we get to explore a city with the liveliest interactions we've had to date. Uncharted 3's Cartagena, while atmospheric, pales in comparison. The lemur interaction alone is worth the price of admission.
Hey there, little guy. How you doing? Hey, you like that, huh?
Hey, tower.
Sully, come on, it's a lemur. Come on, come say hi.
That's all right.
So cute.
In the clock tower, there is the most elaborate and action-packed platforming sequence in Uncharted 4 yet, having to climb the constantly moving gears up, and the way down is, well, not subtle.
Go, climb! Gotta get up! Holy shit!
This opens the pathway to the trials from the 12 founders of Libertalia. Pirate captains creating their perfect utopia where everyone shares the wealth from their heists. As a side note, I was very surprised to see a mighty pirate Easter egg that, for legal reasons, couldn't be actually named in the game proper. More to the point though, this is the longest consecutive set of puzzles yet. In every facet of the game, Uncharted 4 reaches new heist highs. And then there will be another one. After getting engravings that would pinpoint the islands any recruit wanting to reach Libertalia would have to go to, we find out that all this time our team's phones were bugged by Rafe and he knows everything. Thus begins one of the two best action sequences in the entire game. First, we have to fight through the market we explored earlier while avoiding a seemingly unbeatable shoreline APC. Eventually, we reach the 4x4 to try and make a daring escape across a variety of city environments, all following the same principles as the levels before.
Hey, Nate.
Yeah?
We can never, ever come back to this city.
Add it to the list.
There's lots of different pathways to choose from, the scope is massive, but we still eventually get funneled into a singular transition scene of grabbing a crane rope at the bridge.
Nate.
Here, take the wheel.
What? Get out of your goddamn mind.
Yeah, probably.
This sets off the next phase where we have to reach Sam, who's trying to escape from Shoreline on a bike. Even though, as per tradition with set pieces, there's a lot of nudging towards various predefined movements, overall the sequence combines the scripted and systemic approaches, and there's a lot of agency in how we attempt to get closer to Sam. It's largely up to us whether we prefer jeep driving or are more comfortable jumping from truck to truck or hanging on crane ropes. Eventually, we get on Sam's bike, and now in a final, linear, just freaking shoot sequence, we have to take care of the Shoreline APC once and for all, ending on a high note this absolutely massive set piece.
Sam, it's right up on us! Go as fast as I can! It's gotta be close!
Holy shit!
And all this to get closer to arguably the biggest treasure in the series yet. Libertalia might not sound larger than life like Shambhala or Ubar, but goddamn, in terms of pure monetary value, the whole of some of the most successful pirates out there put all together in one place? Yeah, that's a metric ton of cash. There's a reason why Uncharted 4 keeps barraging us with a high after high after high after high, so we could all feel the pain, together with Nathan when his lies finally catch up to him in the moment where the game is literally at its best and our heart is still pumping from excitement.
I'm telling you, that treasure is as good as ours. Shit.
How's the Malaysia job going, Nate? Seems like you're a hair off course.
I can't applaud this scene enough. How awkwardly Sam stands by the side before Nate throws a huge bombshell that it's his long-lost brother. How you can feel the absolute agony in Elena's eyes, let alone the voice performance, which thanks to previous games we already know is going to be fantastic.
Okay, just stop. Was there ever a Malaysia job?
The little detail of Elena fidgeting the ring as if questioning whether it should be there on her finger in the first place, and how Nathan has to face head-on that all his excuses are just that, excuses.
That is bullshit, Nate. You just didn't have the nerve to face me again.
I knew you would react like this.
How would you react? You lied to me for weeks. If you were killed, I wouldn't have even known about it. And now you have a brother. Who are you?
Come on. I'm me. Come on, it's me. It's different this time. I have to save him. I don't even care about the treasure.
The look on your face when you walked into this room. If you're done lying to me, then you should stop lying to yourself. I got a plane to catch. You do what you have to do.
After all this, instead of going after Elena himself, Nate sends Sully. He and Sam will keep going towards Libertalia. Nathan, of course, doesn't take everything that has happened lightly. He's in a deep sense of contemplation. And to represent that, Uncharted 4 puts us in an incredibly large space to explore with absolutely zero combat encounters. And a lot of worries that maybe Avery has spent all the money on the elaborate puzzles leading to Libertalia. Uncharted 4 not only attempts to deconstruct the people who follow erratic clues in an attempt to find swathes of treasure, but those who put those clues in the first place. A lot of what we've seen in Scotland, Kings Bay, these islands is a marvel of technical engineering, but also incredibly narcissistic, and that part is going to rear its head even more towards the end. We get to the segment from in medias res, reach the ominous island after crashing on the boat, and even have to go through a sort of lowest moment part, and finally find Libertalia. Savvy Uncharted players would expect that this is another lost city that befell to a supernatural menace. But you won't find any zombies or ancient guardians here. The downfall is much more human in nature, and that's going to be revealed gradually. Unlike Shambhala and Dubar, we're not going to spend only the last couple of levels in Libertalia, no. In fact, the entire last third of the game is dedicated to it, in a way becoming reminiscent of the very first Uncharted game that really wanted us to get acquainted with its island. So does Uncharted 4. Your first visit to Libertalia is full of pure exploration, understanding how these people lived, having heartfelt conversations with Sam about finally finding this place after all these years. But something is amiss. The place is deserted, but why? What happened? Eventually you find out that the treasury with all the common gold of the colonists was empty, because the 12 pirate captains, the founders of Libertalia, have taken it all to their mansion city of New Devon on the other part of the island. It is after this Rafe and Nadine finally catch up and confront Nate and Sam, which acts as a revelation of another cool trick a Thief's End has employed. We have already discussed several times how agency and input affect our thinking. And when we played as Sam escaping from prison, it wasn't just Sam telling the story, no, it was us playing through it. And by default, what we play is the truth. Except in this case, it isn't. Turns out, there's no Hector Alcazar asking for money. In fact, Alcazar died 6 months ago. And Nathan wanted to go on this adventure so much that he didn't even bother to check. It is Rafe who has released Sam from jail and continued the search for Libertalia with him. Sam, after realizing they might be getting close, decided to ditch Rafe and reach out to Nate so the two brothers would find the city together as they always wanted. Of course, this is not much of a consolation for Nathan, who has practically sacrificed his marriage for the excuse that he needs to save his brother's life. Rafe deems that he needs only one Drake to help find the actual treasure and attempts to shoot Nate, but Sam takes the bullet. Still, Nate gets knocked off the cliff, and after falling he is found by none other than Elena, who followed them. The game takes a break from the present-day storyline to continue Nate's childhood flashback. The place from which Sam and Nate wanted to return their mother's belongings is actually a huge wealthy estate with seemingly nobody living there. It's full of ancient artifacts, but Nate and Sam are interested only in their mother's journals. Although it doesn't prevent them from taking a photo together that later on Nate won't be able to bear to look at.
Come here. Now smile, alright? Don't lose it.
The owner of the mansion is Evelyn, who has obviously made tons of discoveries of historical significance throughout her life. The boys view it as something romantic and awesome. But should one take a look at various letters and journals spread throughout the mansion, they will find that her obsession has led to cutting ties with everyone in both her professional and personal lives. After finding their mother's journals, the biggest of which has been dedicated to finding Avery's treasure from the Gunsway heist, Nate and Sam encounter Evelyn herself, who has already called the police. Her attitude, however, changes after she learns that the owner of those journals is the kid's mother, Cassandra Morgan, who has actually worked with Evelyn in the past. It is in fact Cassandra who had a theory that Francis Drake had heirs. However, there is no one to find the truth now, neither about this nor the Gunsway heist case. As the police arrive, Evelyn was about to let the kids go, but quite dramatically collapses instead. There were clues in the mansion that the owner's health condition is not great at all. So Nate and Sam escape the cops, realize that they probably can't go back to their previous lives anymore, and decide that it's time for Nathan and Samuel Morgan to disappear forever. Sam knows some people who can help with identity forging and let them become Drake's heirs their mother has theorized about, so they could find their own fortune. And hey, Avery's as well.
Nathan, back at that mansion, you knew just as much about that stuff as that poor old lady. Here, I always felt that we were destined for something great. But until tonight, I didn't know what that meant. But this, Mom's unfinished work, this is our chance to restart our lives with brand new identities.
What are you talking about?
I know some guys. Pretty good at forging papers, too. Now, as for our new name, Mom believes that Sir Francis Drake had heirs. Who's to say he didn't? So what do you say? Nathan Drake?
After the flashback, we get back to the present day and see that it was Nate telling everything to Elena. The two now have a whole lot to figure out between themselves, not the least of all the lies Nathan poured on his wife after his obsession has returned.
I wasn't trying to protect you. It's just, I made a promise that I was done with this life.
We both did.
Yeah, but I broke it. I didn't tell you because I was afraid.
Afraid of what?
Of losing you. I guess I was, protecting myself. You know?
And this is the theme that Uncharted 4 builds pretty much everything around. Obsession. The game asks what kind of people go through all this life-threatening, treasure-hunting, adrenaline junkie stuff. The answer is those who just can't seem to live without it. But then a new question arises. Why? This is why I'm fine with the Thief's End utilizing the continuing the parent legacy trope, even though it may feel quite standard when taken on its own. We have two orphaned children whose only connection to anything resembling love is through their mother's journals dedicated to finding the biggest treasure out there. For Nathan, doubly so after he thought his brother died. But obsession is the through line of almost every character in the game. The exceptions are Sully, who is playing the mentor role, and Elena, who has gone through her obsessive phase back in Uncharted 1, although she wouldn't deny that it was exciting to be back in the jungle and do all the crazy stuff again. Because obsession can never truly go away. You can only try to subdue and control it. Rafe has been hunting the treasure for decades, because coming from a rich family with massive inheritance, he wants to make a name for himself, to prove that he's capable of achieving something on his own without everything being given to him on a silver platter. Nadine also deals with inheritance. Shoreline's founder was Nadine's father, and he has made some decisions that led to the Mercenary Corps getting into well, let's say questionable state. She's adamant about bringing Shoreline to its former glory. Then of course there's Avery himself, who despite the usage of the Saint Dismas penitent thief motif, seems to not have been penitent at all. He has been obsessed with amassing hoards of gold, and there's literally nothing he would stop at to keep it. In fact, after the 12 founders have stolen the treasure from the colonists, they started fighting between themselves. Avery and Q called in everyone for a dinner of truce, only to poison the other captains instead. Throughout this review, I've been forcing myself to not just include absolutely every cutscene that's a marvel of writing and spoken words through animation, but the scene where Nate figures out and laments how the most famous pirates and treasure hunters in history have dropped dead just like that because they couldn't let go of their obsession, and then sees the pain in Elena's eyes where she clearly thinks how she almost lost her famous treasure hunter who at any moment might have dropped dead just like that because he couldn't let go of his obsession. I will be honest, it brings tears to my eyes and I'm gonna show it all here.
Good lord.
Looks like we found the party.
Looks like we're a little late. Hey, Nate. Check it out.
It's another sigil. Oh my god.
What?
It's them. Elena, these other pirate captains have founded Libertalia. What the hell happened here?
Well, I'm no forensics expert, but I would say bad drinks?
Apparently.
So what was this? Some kind of wealthy pirate suicide cult?
Yeah, not likely. Not these guys.
On behalf of Lord Avery, I invite you to my manor at sundown tomorrow. The time has come to abandon our animosities and reunite under the banner of God and liberty. Signed, Thomas, too.
What do you bet? Thomas 2, Henry Avery. Looks like our hosts didn't stick around to clean up their mess.
Well, that wasn't very gracious of them.
Okay, so these guys sparked a full-scale revolt when they claimed the treasure for themselves. Now, they took care of the colonists, but then they had to deal with each other. And I'm guessing things got pretty messy. So, Avery and 2 invite them up here to,
abandon our animosities.
Abandon the animosities. Avery makes a grand toast. For God and liberty! Arg, ahoy, mateys, all that. And they all take a swig. Except these 2. And just like that, all the treasure of Libertalia becomes the sole possession of 2 men. These are some of history's greatest pirates, and they all perished in an instant at this very table.
It's incredible.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Which brings us to another topic. It's not enough to just set up the theme of obsession, one has to resolve it, for each character. Saint Dismas has been a key part of Avery's iconography, and the game suggests that following that path of penitence is the only way to ultimately resolve the issues thieves and treasure hunters have. Nathan managed to do that. Avery couldn't. In fact, he went on such a dark path that he would go around chopping hands and hearts of people and create traps out of exploded mummies, also nobody could get to his treasure. Though at this point Nathan worries only about Sam. Rescuing Sam is the final shooting combat encounter of the Thief's End, and most likely Nathan's entire life. And it's the second of the 2 best encounters in the game. Taking place in a shipwreck cove, you'll have to jump from ship to ship, swim as one goes underwater, fire back at goons coming from all over the place. It's fitting that Nathan's final brawl is everything Uncharted is about at its best.
Yeah, let's hide up here. Can't get me up here, right? Sure. Why?
The sequence ends with another fun APC set piece. After Sully saves her ass, Sam and Nathan reunite again.
Hey. How's that?
Oh, bullet grazed my shoulder.
Yeah.
You?
Cliffside, grazed my face.
Hey, look. Not the whole Alcazar thing.
Hey, we gotta save that for later, okay? Which way?
On the beach, other side of this town.
Okay. Sorry. What are we doing?
What do you think we're doing? We're getting the hell off of this rock.
Right, we could do that. Or we could head in that direction, which is a shortcut.
Shortcut to what?
To Avery's treasure.
Oh, wow.
Got the lead for now. We can do this. Nathan, come on. Huh? Look around. Okay? Avery scuttled every last ship on this island. You know why?
Because he was hell-bent on keeping his treasure.
Exactly.
No matter the cost to the others around him.
Because he didn't want anyone to follow him. Because he was leaving. Look at this. Okay, I found his map of the island. Okay? That's his ship right under that mountain.
Oh, boy.
How long we been chasing this thing, huh? You and me. No offense to these guys. But they don't get it.
Actually, Sam, they do. They really do.
Okay.
Trust me, they've seen this kind of obsession before. Sam, we're not those kids anymore. We're not. And we got nothing to prove.
Victor, where's that plane?
Right this way.
Even though Sam knows precisely where the treasure is now, the crew manages to convince him to let it go. Well, for a little bit. Sam realizes that he can't. He has been thinking about this treasure all the years in prison, every waking moment. Obsession is something one can't let go of just like that, even when logically one understands that, yeah, it's unhealthy. So Sam goes on his own to get the treasure, and Nathan follows him, leaving Elena and Sally behind. Now, I could say that this is another instance where the rope creates a ludonarrative dissonance situation, since Nate could easily use it to help the two get where he is and they'd all find Sam together, but this is the one case where I think the rope doesn't create any issues, as Nathan wouldn't want to put Elena and Sally in danger again. Eventually, we reach the ship that's loaded with Avery's treasure. Nadine's men betray her, being bought by Rafe. So she gets tired of this shit and leaves at the first opportunity. The ship with gold is also rigged with traps, and Nadine doesn't want to pay her life for it. Besides, we get to see how Avery and Chu's lives have ended. After taking the treasure for themselves, they killed each other in an attempt for only one person to be the sole owner of it all.
I said, look!
Okay, it's a couple of skeletons. So what?
I don't know as much about history as you boys, but I've got a pretty good idea who those two are.
Well, enlighten us.
It's Avery and two. They killed each other.
Good for them. What's the point?
Everyone obsessed with this treasure gets what they deserve.
So what, you're just leaving us here to die?
Oh, I'm just leaving. Whether you die or not, I don't really care.
Nadine, wait.
So long, Rafe.
Nadine! Nadine! You open this goddamn door right now!
Rafe, she's gone! Come on, give me a hand, we'll all get out of here.
No, that won't work.
Come on, help me with Sam and I'll help you open the door.
I'm not going to be able to enjoy one of these coins, knowing that you and your worthless brother are still sucking air.
This is why the absence of any kind of supernatural element in A Thief's End is important. It helps to focus on only the human side of the equation without any external matters influencing it. Nate wants to just get Sam out of the ship and go, but Rafe, well, let's just say, in his obsessive quest to prove himself, Rafe goes down Avery's path, starting the final boss fight. Uncharted 4 decided to follow the approach from Jake's deception and focus on hand-to-hand combat, or in this case, sword-to-sword combat. I think as a whole this works because it allows the game's final confrontation to get all up close and personal. And hey, this time we can actually block hits from different sides.
You don't know when to give up! That's good! Don't hand it to me. I had everything handed to me on a goddamn silver platter. I earned this.
It's hard not to feel for Rafe a bit here. His motivation is understandable, and let's be fair, we've been a thorn in his side for a pretty long time now. That being said, Rafe has always shown aggressive tendencies, and there's no way to reason with him now. After Rafe's karmic death, Uncharted 4 makes it seem like it's about to pull a karmic death on Sam as well, one last victim of Avery's gold obsession. However, Sam stays alive because the game decides that Nathan deserves a happy ending. Those who value family, love, friendship over gold do. And so finally, Nathan fully breaks the cycle of pulpy adventure story setups and gets to retire from treasure hunting. Well, retire from illegal treasure hunting. Elena realized that neither Nathan nor her are really going to get over the love for adventure, but there's a way to go about it that's not self-destructive. So, with the help of some Libertalia coins, Sam, who still plans to do some thrill-seeking on his own, sneaked into her pockets. She wants to purchase Jameson's company and resurrect her old show, starting with a Malaysia job. Some of her contacts actually got her the permits required. Treasure hunting within legal bounds. Nathan agrees. And then, after a time skip, we get to play a small epilogue as their daughter, Cassie, who discovers keys to a closet that always remained locked. It houses all the relics from Nate's previous adventures. Seeing as they can't hide this from their daughter any longer, Nate and Elena decide to tell everything that happened, starting from Uncharted 1, in what is definitely a nostalgia-filled moment for everyone who has played the series since 2007.
Well, let's see. For me, it started when this guy called me up with a scoop on a massive historical find. It sounded like a complete fraud.
Yeah, handsome fraud.
No, I hadn't even met him yet.
She knew. She knew.
So this fraud says, if you fund the trip, then I'll give you the coffin of Sir Francis Drake.
And for the record, I totally delivered.
Yeah, you delivered us into the hands of Indonesian pirates.
No, come on, you know I had nothing to do with that.
Okay, guys, time out. You're saying that you were attacked by pirates after you found the coffin of Sir Francis Drake. Is that right?
Yeah,
that's pretty much
right.
it. Yeah.
Bullshit.
Language.
Crap.
Better.
All right, so keep going.
You know what? The sun is up, boat's ready, wind is just right. You want to continue the story? I say we do it on the water. Come on.
Well, wait, what'd Francis Drake look like? Was it gross?
Actually, he wasn't in there. Yeah, just his journal with a map to El Dorado.
But like with some of the previous games, this doesn't necessarily have to be the end of your adventure, as there's also a multiplayer mode.
Don't start a fight you can't finish. Couldn't cut it, eh?
Uncharted 4 multiplayer at the moment of writing this is actually still officially active. However, a time might come when it's not. The PS5 and PC versions of The Thief's End don't have it, and I assume should it be left only on PS4, sooner or later the servers are going to shut down. I have conflicting thoughts about the multiplayer mode of Uncharted 4. In terms of actual core gameplay, it's the best iteration of Uncharted Online thanks to the mechanics inherited from the single-player mode. Therefore, I can't deny that oftentimes there were moments that I found very fun. But The Thief's End went even farther than Uncharted 3 in its attempt to create a self-contained multiplayer game And you know my opinion about this already. It's very tricky to do so. And honestly, the new mechanics that Uncharted 4 incorporates in the form of special mystical powers, as well as the possibility to purchase items from within the match depending on your loadout, which includes both weapons as well as sidekicks, that's just too much. I'm not saying that any of those are bad ideas in theory, it's just that every such addition influences the balance greatly, and honestly I can't say that balance is the best part of the Thieves' End multiplayer. The more mods and loadout capabilities people get, the more advantage they have, which in turn has an effect on the simple acts of fun. That's why very straightforward modes like Uncharted 2 had can work better in games like this. And to be fair, during post-launch, Uncharted 4 attempted to capture that magic by introducing a more back-to-basics match type. But what does it matter if the entirety of the rest of the multiplayer is based on the power progression that match type can't provide? So while certainly fun at its core, I can't say that the Thieves' End multiplayer has had any long-term longevity for me. Still, as an optional side mode, it won't have any real effect on the Stasocritic rating.
Where are you? I'm down here! Come on! Oh, God. Nathan!
Stasocritic is a scoring system that consists of 5 different categories with various weights, and each category can get assigned a rating from 0 to 10 based on specific criteria. The first category is design, which has the biggest weight, 4, since the way a game is played and structured defines your experience the most. I will have to assign a 9. With fantastic core gameplay, stunning set pieces, great puzzles for this type of game, and of course the way gameplay is used to elicit emotions, there is not much one can ask more of from Uncharted 4. At the same time, there's a considerable number of smaller flaws, some underwhelming and semi-combat encounters, over-reliance on crates for navigational puzzles, lack of dodge in special one-on-one fights, stuff like that. Every example on their own is absolutely forgivable, but there is enough of them spread through the entire game that it becomes quite noticeable, and I feel like I can't assign a 10, even though of course absolute perfection is not necessary for that score. However, when it comes to emotions, which has a weight of 3, since this category is all about personal feelings and those are very important as well, I will assign a definite 10. Uncharted 4: A Thief's End is more than just a compelling experience and a fun action game. It's touching, heartfelt, human, it has tons of exciting movie-like playable sequences, but it's just as memorable for its quiet, slower moments. Next, we have Cohesion, a category with a weight of 2 that's all about how well different aspects of the game are connected together. Now, this is an interesting one, since throughout the review I've mentioned some discrepancies between the story and the game. Among them are actual aspects we haven't delved deep into much, like how A Thief's End treats Shoreline as any other bad guys from the series, even though that conflicts somewhat with the deconstructive nature of the game. That being said, I will still assign a 10 in this category, and that's because of how throughout the entire experience, Uncharted 4 puts us in the shoes of Nathan Drake, not only via the means of cutscenes, but gameplay as well. In fact, it's thanks to gameplay and its pacing that we get to really understand Nathan as a person, and that's a far stronger positive than the negatives the game might have in this regard, plus it fits the criteria. I guess the most fitting score in this situation would be a 9.5. But honestly, I don't want to go into the rabbit hole of in-between scores, since that takes away from the clarity of the criteria for each ranking. That being said, when it comes to context, which is a category revolving around narrative, characters, world-building, writing, and everything else that provides context to the player, it's a 10 with no caveats. If I'd wanted to be extremely nitpicky, I could say how the long-lost relative suddenly introduced in the middle of the series trope is extremely tired, but the actual implementation of said trope is actually really good and feeding into the core themes and arcs of the game. I could say how the twist regarding Alcazar relies on a lot of incidental aspects, the way certain lines were phrased, how there was always just a little something preventing from figuring out the whole deal, but this becomes apparent only on repeat playthrough after you already know the twist. But as far as I'm concerned, if something works and makes sense on the first playthrough, then it's all that matters. Besides, I do really appreciate Uncharted 4's exploration of obsession, family values, and the overall deconstruction of the treasure hunter archetype that's accompanied by some amazing writing to boot. And amazing visuals too, which is relevant for the aesthetics category that's all about pleasing the senses. I don't see anything else I could assign here other than a 10. Not only Uncharted 4 is a technological marvel that looks great and retains its own visual identity while providing extremely authentic graphics, everything in this game is quite frankly astonishing. The music and how it's integrated into gameplay, the sound design, all the little details in the environments and animation, the subtlety of facial expressions, and how the game combines systemic actions with crafted cinematic set pieces while retaining visual coherence and avoiding bugs as much as possible. Which brings us to the final Stasocritic rating. After combining all scores and their weights together, Uncharted 4: A Thief's End will get assigned a total score of 96. A truly fantastic game. The Stasocritic system is specifically designed in such a way that it's really difficult to get to any of the score extremes, be it on the positive or negative side. And the fact that A Thief's End is so close to 100, just one number in one category away, is a testament to its quality. I would recommend this title to everyone, even those who aren't Uncharted fans. While the ending epilogue might not strike a chord with people who haven't experienced the entire series, the rest of the game can be greatly enjoyed as is.
Where the hell are you going? You're the one who said just head down! Jesus! Coming through! Oh, this was really a great idea, Nate. Do you want to drive? No, you're doing just fine.
The Uncharted series started out as a pure, pulpy adventure that didn't quite know what it wanted to do. By Thief's End, it not only perfected its pulpy storytelling, but also decided to deconstruct the genre itself. Once again, I can't help but feel that Drake's motto, "Greatness from small beginnings," is especially fitting. Uncharted 1 might have been the small beginnings, but Uncharted 4 is true greatness.